Lowe's. Find the right flooring for the job in Lowe's newly redesigned flooring showroom. Shop our expanded assortment of trusted brands and get up to 35% off style selections, Stainmaster, and Stainmaster Pet Protect Special Order Carpet. And while you're here, save $100 on a DeWalt 20-volt max 6-amp-hour 2-pack of batteries. Now just $179. Get more of what you need faster and save more where it counts from the ground up. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 8/26 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
I see you.
Avatar Fire and Ash is now streaming on Disney+. It's the film critics are calling the best Avatar yet.
Yeah! Go, 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 go!
A true epic and completely jaw-dropping.
This is the only pure thing in this world.
Return to Pandora on Disney+.
It will be an adventure for the whole fam.
And watch the Oscar-winning phenomenon at home.
This is sick!
Avatar Fire and Ash, now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
For 20-something years, I was a hardcore engineer. Everything from, low-level design as a design engineer, all the way up to writing engineering teams for 7 years. So I kind of seen it from all different angles. And it's been an interesting path, especially when I look back retrospectively and see how certain things now impact what's coming out of my book. It's almost like it was crafted together by some grand design for this message to come out. And I think that happens to a lot of people as writers. They're essentially mouthpieces for a broader message, especially if the message is, of this nature. It surprised me as well. So when you write the way I do, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like people who do automatic writing. They put their pencil down, they write a whole bunch of stuff real fast, and then they look at it and go, what just came out? When I write, oftentimes it's like that.
For
sure. When I start writing, that's it. It's like I've been given my bread and water, and I'll sit there and get it done. And it goes all hours of the day and night. And by the time the smoke clears, after this book took me just under 4 months.
For sure.
I was well over 700 pages, and I culled it down quite a bit to get to 588. So for that to happen in such a short period of time, by the time I did that, then recorded the audio book, and many sleepless nights, and I let it get cold for about 3 days, and I started to review it for editing. I didn't recognize a lot of it. I was like, wow, did I write that?
Wow.
So for me, it's an inspirational process that is an unveiling to me as well. It's very unique and it's fun. I did that on purpose because I had the opportunity to hire a professional narrator to do it. And I'm going to redo my first book now that I'm more of less of a hack at getting rid of noise and all the kind of things. I've learned the tools after being in this space for a year. So that's next on my list for anybody who's listening. I just redid the edition of the Anunnaki of Buru with the nice paper that I had in this one and so on and so forth. So it's getting a facelift right now, totally.
Sure.
Okay. And so that's gonna be really good. That book is still selling very well all around the world. You like engineering tables, don't you? Everything's got to be there put in a table. Actually, there were more tables in my Anunnaki of Nibiru book than there were in the second book. From all the planet mapping to the names and the Enuma Elish to the zodiac changed,
Sure.
The God table. Actually, that God table turned out to be a real eye-opener for people, just like it was for me.
Mm-hmm.
Once you see a name that crossed multiple cultures and it went thousands of years, is either a carryover name or the real being lived that long. And when we found out these beings were mortal for all intents and purposes, it changes a lot. We'll do a warm-up, and I want you to understand what I did with this book, whose perspective I took, so you can kind of understand, and then you'll understand how my perspective of the Anunnaki.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw what Sitchin did in terms of identifying the Enuma Elish as a very seminal document. But if you could understand that, you could probably have a much better understanding of what's going on in our solar system now, if it was true. So I did a deep dive on the Enuma Elish and translated that for people. Of course, there's 11 tablets, so there's a lot of data, and it's very complicated to count.
Mm-hmm.
But through that that process, I kept noticing the earliest names that were showing up and the ones that were also perpetuating all through the Sumerian documents. And there were some key players, okay? So I kind of looked at those, and Sitchin had said, okay, well, Nibiru is the 12th planet. It was an invader planet that came into the solar system. If you're counting from the outside in, why wouldn't you count it number 1? They made it number 12. And so there were some telling things that Sitchin pointed out. So, but the idea of affiliating 12th with their planet and the 7th with our planet, that never left me. And I'm like, yeah, this is the 7th, but look at all the symbology with 7s. You know, there were 7 chakras, 7 colors of the spectrum of light that we can see from 4 to 700 nanometers. It goes on and on and on. Okay.
Sure.
So 7's a pretty magical number. And from that standpoint, he wrote a book called The Lost Book of Enki to give the perspective of this ancient pioneer who was on this planet doing what he did. Seminal book. And I, for some reason, got guided to take the perspective of the second geneticist that upgraded us so we could procreate. And that was Ningshita. And he showed up in the Sumerian account of the Enuma Elish. So let's kind of do, who are the Anunnaki? What did they tell us? And how do we get to this perspective from this being who had many names? Ningshita, he was called Mumu in the Enuma Elish, and several others. So let's back up a little bit and put those names in context so we can go forward.
Sure.
But what I want to drive home is through the entire book, I decided to take the perspective of this being that showed up in the Enuma Elish that looked like he was used in a benevolent way for mankind, just as Enki was. Okay? So that ought to help understand how I approach this. So that said, who were the Anunnaki of Nibiru in my first book? Well, apparently 450,000 years ago, they had atmospheric problems on a planet that had been caught into our solar system, a trapped planet that perturbed the orbital plane of Neptune and Uranus. And our scientists later on discovered this. So this is how science got focused on what happened to the edge of the atmosphere. Well, in their Enuma, in this account, they left Nibiru and came to the Earth to get resources to help protect their atmosphere. They were having problems with solar radiation as they came in close perihelion with the sun. They're in a retrograde orbit, very long elliptical orbit that takes 3,600 years to complete. Now, if you know anything about elliptical orbits, they sometimes deviate by plus or minus up to 50 years, depending on what's going on out in the deep void of space as they're traversing through this. You know, there's various levels of parasitic drag that might happen. So think of a dust cloud or something that's slowing down the travel of the planet. You don't know. So they came to the Earth to get gold as a resource. And they had a long...
Pros, find the right flooring for the job in Lowe's newly redesigned flooring showroom. Shop our expanded assortment of trusted brands and get up to 35% off style selections, Stainmaster, and Stainmaster Pet Protect Special Order Carpet. And while you're here, save $100 on a DeWalt 20-volt max 6-amp-hour 2-pack of batteries, now just $179. Get more of what you need faster and save more where it counts from the ground up. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 8/26 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
The perfect lunch combo. That first bite of your favorite sub, followed by ice-cold Pepsi. Add a couple of friends, and now that's next level. Suddenly, the laughs get louder, the stories keep flowing, and the food tastes better. Because Pepsi brings out more flavor, more fun, and more of the moment. Food deserves Pepsi. Grab a Pepsi Zero Sugar today.
I don't know, brutal pioneering experimentation to get the resources, put the infrastructure in place, and try to do this massive undertaking. And the reality is, you stop and think about this. If you got a problem with your atmosphere and you're putting something in it that shields you when you come in close proximity to the sun, well, you're probably going to have to keep redoing that because it's going to be peeled off by any incursions from meteors or anything else that's disturbing this. It's not going to stay forever. So they knew they were going to have to keep redoing this. And I think ultimately, knowing that, they knew they were fighting a losing battle. Their planet had been caught in our orbit. They were doing what they could to keep the radiation levels and the environment livable for them. but I think ultimately they knew it was a losing battle. So using their planet in retrograde orbit, meaning it's going in the opposite direction around the sun of all the other planets, that's weird. And it's not going around on the same solar ecliptic that the rest of the planets are. It's at a very distinct angle. So the fact that they gave their planet symbols and names alluding to a planet of crossing makes sense to me now. Okay, so they come here 450,000 years ago, try to get gold. They end up having a labor shortage. They didn't bring the tools to do heavy mining, and they seem to have a deference to using biological entities to do their bidding anyway. So if you do the math, according to how long it was before Noah's flood came, they were in those mines for 176,000 years mining before a revolt happened. They were called the Ajiji, and they were down in South Africa, and we know where their mines are now. They're owned by the Anglo-American Mining Corporation, and then the new ones up in West Africa and Ghana have been sucked up by the Viking Mining Corporation. So the outsiders that were affiliated with gold have known this story a long time. All right, so they revolt out of the mines after a very long period. They get replaced by a chimeric creation from Enki and his half-sister Ninhartsog. They were council members. Enlil was in charge at that point. He was the Lord of the Earth, or Lord of the Air. And so think about him as a bureaucratic commander, and Enki was this wild-eyed scientist like Frankenstein. So the bottom line is Enki found a life form on the steppes of Africa, and I believe it was Neanderthal.
Sure.
Mixed his genetics with it. It was a female. In vitro fertilized Ninhartsog, his half-sister and the medical officer who had her headquarters in Shrupak, same place Noah was king. And they produced a baby. And this baby couldn't procreate initially. And that's where our next hero comes in, and that's Ningshita. He shows up, does the analysis, does a genetic upgrade to the Adamu and the Eve, and then they're taken up to Eridu, Enki's first city that he built 450,000 years ago. It was still there, even though he was down in Africa. Well, that was where his temple complex was. So they went up there to determine if they could procreate. This was the famous Garden of Eden story. Enki and Enlil were the two beings in the garden. The snake, caduceus geneticist, was Enki that got demonized. And his brother was Enlil, who promoted himself as God and threw everybody out of the garden and had editorial oversight over the Sumerian documents that ended up as the Torah, written by Hebrew priests held in captivity in Babylon. Okay, so they were placating Enlil with their story in this. So that led us to the Atrahasis account, which is seminal, and I hope everybody's had a chance to read that. Because in there, we have our creation account, our destruction account, because after 600 years, Enlil decided to wipe us out with plagues, cutting off the food and the whole thing. And also in that account, we have the biblical story of Noah as he's encountering these Anunnaki. Well, now we know that Noah, Atrahasis, who is Zeus Sudra, also known as Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, was Enki's son. And you'll see that in my genealogy table. And it also shows up in the Lost Book of Enoch in the birth of Noah. You realize he was born with blonde hair and blue eyes and freaked his father Lamech out, who went to look for an answer how it is his wife, Batanash, just had an alien child. It's a fascinating account. Anyway, so these Anunnaki are here mining gold. They have a revolt. They get replaced with a primitive worker 220,000 years ago, and that's us. So moving forward in time, the Sumerians knew all of this information and acted in accordance with this in their culture, wrote about it, knew they were genetically created, and they were there to serve their gods. All of them that were enthroned in the Mesopotamian temples, multiple ones, not just one. Well, it turns out there was a council of them that was very structured with 6 males and 6 females. And that's what I put in the God table of my book. So if you know those names, you can start seeing where they started using AKA names in other cultures. And that's where I really got my head spinning around, was following one of those out of the Sumerian account that showed up in Greece and Rome. And then, and this was Isis, by the way, and she tells you all her names through the various cultures, and all of a sudden this starts becoming real, that even though the cultures were separated by thousands of years, these were the same beings. And that's hard to get your arms around. Okay? So now we've got this primitive worker. They make another deal with the Anunnaki when there's just a few of them left. This is Noah and his family on Mount Ararat. And then from 12,000 years forward after the last ice age, when this big flood came, that's when the book Guns, Germs, and Steel was so seminal to me, because it talks about the culture from 13,000 years forward. Well, that's the time when they restarted culture after the last ice age, and it started right in the Fertile Crescent. So I started following that story forward. Okay, so we did all that in the first book, and then we ended up realizing those names that we brought forward were also affiliated with symbols that we're seeing in world governments everywhere. And some of them are part of this New World Order push that's pissing everyone off, stealing their freedom and their rights.
Sure.
At the same time, there was this concept of a new Atlantis. Well, what does that mean? And you had to go back and find out about the old Atlantis to see what that means. Well, it turns out they're happening at the same time. The old Atlantis is coming to rise because it's time, but the New World Order forces that are opposed to it are at odds. So now, if you fast forward from where we were in the Anunnaki of Buru, you can look at what's going on in the world between Israel and the Palestinians, between the Americans and the Russians, and all of a sudden you realize there's a father-son team here that's spanning different cultures, and they're running things. What are they doing? Well, there's destruction in the headlines. So who were they? Well, it turns out this concept of creation and destruction is intense. We know that in the physical universe, there's a homeostasis, both whether it's with the kingdom, phylum, all the way down to the class, order, species, and variety of animal life, but also in the heavens. You've got black holes that are able to consume anything and turn it back into energy. Mm-hmm. So, in general, what I'm saying, creation and destruction are always happening simultaneously, and they have to be in balance.
Sure.
You with me?
I'm sure.
But I never applied that to the energy of man. So now all of a sudden you're seeing massive populations and massive destruction where humans look like they're getting erased like the pawns. Well, this is nothing new. So this really is disturbing to me to see this happening. And this was part of my catalyst to go back and find the thread through all of this to understand how this level of creation and destruction can be happening in man's path. Mm-hmm. And this took me all the way back to the creation of man, when Enki described taking a being as he was creating the Adapa. And I don't normally do this, but because of where you are, James, I really want to do this with you. He decided to take the essence out of one of the fellow gods, and I believe it was one of the Ajiji, and he named who it was. His name was Yahweh, okay? And it's not to be confused with the being Allah that's mentioned earlier. That was Nanar Sin, okay? This being was killed. And then during this ritual, he essentially coaxed the essence, the countenance of the being, and put it into this new body. And then through this ritual, he essentially pulled a Frankenstein right on spot, infused the energy into this being, and gave them intelligence. And because of the genetic code that he gave us, he specified, and you're going to have a lifespan maximally of 120 years. That's amazing. Wow. Think reverse exorcism, essentially. Right? Instead of a priest and a cross throwing this energy out of a body, saying this is not welcome, he's doing just the opposite. He's coaxing the energy of this one into that one. We're not talking about going through, going to heaven and having to wait in purgatory, all this stuff. No lawyer present. Energy from this one to that one. That is a level of control over energy and matter that's either complete science fiction, or you're looking at a being that is able to operate dimensionally beyond the hologram that we're in. And he just created an avatar right in front of you. Mm-hmm. A energy container, a meat host that he can decide what energy goes in. I think genetics mixed with the physics that illuminates how matter is glued together
The carnation.
really is really the ultimate. If you can figure that out, how matter gets stitched together, you could see how objects are made in the simulator that we think are real.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're going to get to this, and I don't want to jump the gun, but that's the part I've been so focused on. Probably because of my deep dive into photonics at Light Point. I mean, this was where physics met the marketplace. We were trying to get communications to work with photons, through the air. And we learned a lot about the nature of light. And I think that was important in understanding what came to be in this book for me in my disclosure. Probably one of the most important pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So how is matter composed from the energy? E equals mc squared. We get that. But so let's keep that in the back of our mind as we go through this. This very important creation account from Enki is seminal in his understanding of energy and matter. I mean seminal. You're looking at the creation of the first Avatar. Think of all the movies, The Matrix, the Avatar, and Hunger Games, and all this where they're talking about this holographic, right? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm kind of open that up with you at the front, because when you ask the question, if the Anunnaki created mankind, who created them? Now you're looking at a being who created Enki that has this kind of capabilities, and this is where the unveiling happened in my book, and it's so magical for me as well. It solidified in my mind what the truth was, and I was so excited I wanted to share it.
For sure.
So I hope I answered kind of the background of the Anunnaki, and we can real quickly do the key players' names, and I'm going to do them slow so that people are listening. So we got Anu, who was the king, ranked 60 on the council. He was back on Nibiru. Okay, and not to leave out the feminine side. Okay, there was Anu and Antu, his wife, and she was known as some very ancient names in Turkey, like Sybil and such, but that was his wife.
Pros, find the right flooring for the job in Lowe's newly redesigned flooring showroom. Shop our expanded assortment of trusted brands and get up to 35% off style selections, Stainmaster, and Stainmaster Pet Protect Special Order Carpet. And while you're here, save $100 on the DeWalt 20-volt max 6-amp-hour 2-pack of batteries. Now just $179. Get more of what you need faster and save more where it counts from the ground up. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 8/26 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
The perfect lunch combo. That first bite of your favorite sub, followed by ice-cold Pepsi. Add a couple of friends, and now that's next level. Suddenly, the laughs get louder, the stories keep flowing, and the food tastes better. Because Pepsi brings out more flavor, more fun, and more of the moment. Food deserves Pepsi. Grab a Pepsi Zero Sugar today.
I'm not giving up.
I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either gonna be okay.
No, stop!
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.
His first son, was born between he and his actual wife, Antu, and that was Enki. He was the oldest. He was the firstborn, and you can see that in my genealogy table. Okay, but because of Anunnaki rules, the person that's in line to rule comes from the father and his half-sister. Anu's half-sister was Ki Urash, U-R-A-S-H, and she's in the genealogy table. Anu had a son with her, and his name was Enlil, the second born. Well, he was destined to be higher ranking than Enki because of that birthright rule. And it has to do with the contribution from the mitochondrial DNA from the female to perpetuate the purity of the genetic line from these Anunnaki. Okay, that's why they did it. Well, it's still going on in the world in places. It's quite interesting. So, and when you understand that it has to do with the female's mitochondrial DNA exceeds that the male's when it gets contributed, that the maternal archetype can be perpetuated, and they knew that. Okay, so So we got Anu, we got Enki, and we got Enlil. One other birth came from that relationship, and that was Enki's half-sister, and that was Ninhartsog. So she's the daughter of Anu and Ki. Now, why is the name Ki important? Well, it turns out that's a Sumerian name for Earth. So this being took on the name for Earth, and her other name was Urash. Okay, so getting used to the idea of having multiple names when they live so long, it's hard to wrap your arms around, but it's how it is. Okay, so you gotta have a table to look at to keep from this being name soup. And as an engineer, when I was reading all these names through all the accounts, well, I was overwhelmed too. That's why I did a genealogy table to get it all straight. Well, yeah, so she was for Enlil, but not for Enki. Okay, so now we got Enki, the scientist, Enlil, the bureaucrat who's in line to rule, and then Hartzog, who's both of their half-sisters, who's the medical officer, who is Isis. She becomes Isis in Egypt. Okay, she's the mother of all of humanity because of this act that happened in the Atrahasis. Okay, and she calls herself that, and she's always known that. And the people that were in the Isis cults knew that too. Anyway, so now we've got man created, man enslaved, man destroyed in the Atrahasis. I mean, brutally, with disease and everything else. And of course, the destroyer was Enlil there. Okay, that was his job. So Enki looks like creator, always the creator. And unfortunately for Enlil, and maybe they switch roles, he plays the destroyer role. So if you're an Enlilite, you're usually hooked up with him to take down things that they don't want. And you'll see this through the book, in particular in the Lamentation of Ur, where he did it to one of his own sons. Okay? All right, let's not get ahead. So now we've got a primitive workforce that's going to be spawned off from the remnants of Noah and his family. They're the only ones that survived. And they wouldn't have survived had it not been for Enki interceding multiple times, and then finally telling his brother Enlil, who was trying to make them all go away, that look, the floods just happened, you wiped them all out. Atrahasis is my son, and I say we let him live because there's not going to be any primitive workers here to grow our food or serve us if we make him go away too. And Enlil must not have been real astute on that. Either he knew they'd achieved their milestones in the gold mines and they didn't need them anymore, or he was just looking to make sure the genetic offspring from his brother, who was clearly much brighter than he was wanting to make them just go away. And I think there was a little of both. The idea that these genetic offspring were being enslaved to serve them, I think that violated galactic law. I think Enki knew that, and he was trying to figure out how to imbue these beings with something to make up for that, something that would allow them to have the same experience that they did, because he knew it was wrong to enslave them. And in his writings, when you read them, he talked about that. He felt like, this was a very difficult fate and destiny decision for him to use his intellect to do that. And when you see that he was wrestling that way back then, now fast forward to GMO modifications, building nuclear weapons, all the things that we can do, but we need to stop and ask ourselves, should we be doing that? And it's the same thing he was asking himself way back then. So very honorable traits from somebody who was trying to help us versus this other being was like, well, just make them all go away. They're so subservient barbarians. We designed them to be primitive workers, and you want them to be something else in that? You want them to have consciousness and know the difference between good and evil? What do you want them on my staff? Is that what you're doing? So from Enlil's standpoint, he felt like he was being incurred upon by Enki. And it shows up in their brutal relationship and just two half brothers that didn't get along, and they didn't see the world the same way at all. Well, he reminds me of some of the people I see in the Pentagon in a way. It's like, we don't care about anything else. We've got the big hammer, and look out there. There's a big nail. There's a little nail. There's a tack. Whatever it is, I'm going to hit it with a hammer. And it's like this. It's like when you watch Hercules and how he was portrayed as this kind of, I don't know, bully, not very smart, constantly showing off his strength capabilities, but he never really was very smart. Reminds me of the offspring of must have been an animal. Because when I read the lies he tried to tell in the Bible to make himself the only God, he did not do a good job.
Sure.
He didn't do a good job. Tense change problems using Boolean violations of the absolute, blah, blah, blah. Any scientist that would read this go, what? And I bring out some of that in the book. Okay. So I hope we've kind of come from Nibiru, got through all the main players, Enlil, Enki, Ninhartsog, and then the seminal son, which was Ningshita. And I like him because he's like us, James. He was like an engineer. He was the one that didn't get credit. He was in the lab doing all the work. But he was the one that was beaming brilliance from behind the closed door, but never got put on the stage. Do you see it? I see it as well. That's the interesting part. You can tell now, if you examine DNA, that essentially it's a lexicon. When a lexicon is a rule set and how you put together symbols so that they make some sense, just like our language. So DNA is a language. And what's interesting, it's only composed of 4 characters. So you ask yourself, how many ways can you permute 4 characters to create sequences and such that they manifest RNA, DNA, and chemicals compose our body? So it's an interesting question to ask. And then you find out that, in addition to that, a large part of it is not understood, so we label it junk. Well, now recently, with all the DNA studies, they've actually figured out that 95% is not junk. It's got a meta lexicon sequencing function that controls the protein sequencing down at the lower level. So you got a layered, nested program that is so sophisticated that you realize only somebody who writes software code would understand how to predicate such a thing. And I don't know about you, but I've written a lot of code in a lot of different languages. And when I saw this and read Timothy Leary's discussion about these latent programming circuits that seem to be triggered in all humans, for instance, he mentioned 8 different circuits. I don't know if you were aware of these. And we can go through them if you want.
Sure.
But I think they're extremely interesting. And I don't want to take this off of the Anunnaki story too much, but the idea of having a DNA trigger is really fascinating to me, because you realize what a brilliant engineer Ningshita was when you read these accounts. He had the same knowledge his dad did. And I think he possibly even took it farther. So in the Garden of Eden, the carrier of the caduceus was Enki. That was a symbol for a geneticist. Okay. That symbol got handed to his son. So all of a sudden, now you see Ningshita, Thoth, Hermes, Mercury's running around with this symbol everywhere. Okay. So there was a transfer of power, what I'm telling you, from father to son, and that shows up in the Emerald tablets. Well, they did that. So when a son inherited a kingship from the father, not only did he take on his name, but he took on all the attributes of the other entities that were below him at that rank. For instance, when Marduk became the head of the council in about 2000 BCE, he took on the rank of 50, Lord of the Earth. Actually, he took it by force, it seems like. But he was in line to rule. Let me think about it. No. He was Enki's firstborn son, so he was not born of him and his half-sister, who was Isis. That was the problem for him. Mm-hmm. But he was the firstborn, just like Enki was. So he took over he actually smote the Enlilites, got them out of Mesopotamia, and ended up in the head of the council for a while. Okay? He took it away from Enlil, the commander. Now think about what power he must have had to be able to do that. Yeah. You had to be able to raise an army and be just as destructive as he was to go do that. And I don't think Enki was a big proponent of war after you look at how he described his relationship to Atrahasis, his son, in dealing with these destructive incursions. He was more like Gandhi. He taught passive resistance techniques. versus, just fighting with a gun. He was a lot more evolved than that, it seems.
Pros, find the right flooring for the job in Lowe's newly redesigned flooring showroom. Shop our expanded assortment of trusted brands and get up to 35% off style selections, Stainmaster, and Stainmaster Pet Protect Special Order Carpet. And while you're here, save $100 on a DeWalt 20-volt max 6-amp-hour 2-pack of batteries. Now just $179. Get more of what you need faster and save more where it counts from the ground up. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 8/26 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
I see you.
Avatar Fire and Ash is now streaming on Disney Plus. It's the film critics are calling the best Avatar yet.
Yeah! Go, 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 go!
A true epic and completely jaw-dropping.
This is the only pure thing in this world.
Return to Pandora on Disney Plus.
It will be an adventure for the whole family.
And watch the Oscar-winning phenomenon at home.
This is sick!
Avatar Fire and Ash, now streaming on Disney Plus. Rated PG-13.
Okay, so this idea of this Caduceus is very important, and the idea of him being a geneticist and possibly somebody able to write computer programs. Now that you realize how sophisticated they were, listen, you think they didn't have a simulation of the constellations and all life forms to determine what the state space was? They had a sensor fused view of the whole environment they were operating in. Of course they did. We would do it today. Sure. Look at we have Google Earth where we can go in a 3D model and visit anywhere on the Earth. Do you think they didn't have anything as sophisticated or more? Of course they did. Sure. Well, keeping that in mind, Dr. Leary introduces some latent circuits that seem to be triggered by various things in our life. And I'll give you a couple for instances, unless you want to go all through them. There was a biosurvival circuit. It's imprinted by the mother or mothering object, and it's subsequently conditioned by either nourishment or threat. So that's your very lowest level one, biosurvival. Then he talks about an emotional territorial circuit. It's imprinted when the infant stands up, walks around, begins to struggle for power in the family, for structure of hierarchy. Yeah, pretty interesting. Well, so you can go to the age that a child is and start looking at these circuits and go, is that happening? Is that happening like he said? Here's the next one. Time-binding semantic circuit. It's imprinted by human symbol systems. Symbols, very important. And artifacts. This is what controls the local paradigm. So if you start showing a human a bunch of symbols, apparently it triggers this and starts waking them up. Now, is that why all the symbols are put out in the public for us? So it's to wake us up? Possibly. Number 4, socio-sexual circuit. It's imprinted by the first orgasm mating experience and also by tribal taboos. It processes sexual pleasure, definitions of right or wrong, reproduction, parental rules, and the raising of young. Okay, so now if you know that circuit is triggered and you go expose it to the family guy in this culture, what do you think is going to happen? Especially when they're younger than when they should be exposed to this. Are you trying to create sex slaves in the culture? Sure looks like it. Mm-hmm. Neurosemantic circuit. It's imprinted by ecstatic or spiritual experience. Oh. Now think about this also. Are these latent DNA sequences possibly related to the energy and quantized levels in your consciousness that are that this Caduceus symbol represents? Very possibly. Okay, the next one is the collective neurogenetic circuit, which contains our entire evolutionary script covering the past, present, and future. Could that be our junk DNA that nobody's talking about? This circuit state was referred to by Carl Jung as the collective unconsciousness. And it's also affiliated with the distinct archetypes. Now, when you get to this level that you're having archetypal discussions about the hero's journey and all that, like I did in my book, that wakes people up, that circuit, at a very different level. So if you put your eyes on something that exposes you to these archetypal distinctions that Enki created, it looks like it triggers another circuit. Let's keep going. The next one, number 7, is the meta-programming circuit. And this appears to be the realm of conscious reprogramming and re-imprinting of the other circuits. So this is the level where personal development programs have a good effect. Okay, so this is pretty far along, and this is the where the individual consciously chooses to re-imprint the unconscious mind through the application of symbols and internal imagery. Now, keep that one in mind, as I mentioned in my book, that every seeker on this path ought to take a look at the 17 breath or 18 breath if you're far enough along, Merkaba meditation. It activates number 7. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then the last one is the non-local quantum circuit. And the operations here occur transpersonally beyond the ego. This is the realm of out-of-body and near-death experience. So your DNA, what I'm telling you, is an intentional design, a computer programming language, if you will, that can be activated by external triggers, many of which are either energetic or taken in through the visual system, which is symbolic. So that's interesting to know, isn't it? We just now, in the last 25 years, started decoding DNA. I mean, we've gone all this time and had no idea what it was. We're just so the newbies on the block relative to this. I want to give you kind of a heads up why I was attracted to some of these circuits. You know, my boy JJ was born with a genetic disorder called the George's syndrome.
Sure, we talked.
And he's
before.
missing part of the material off his 22nd chromosome. And the symptoms are quite severe. There's over 200 different anomalies that can happen to a child like this, and some of the worst ones are severe mental retardation and congenital heart defects. Well, my kid got all those. Okay, so he's a medical mess. But at the same time, in working with him and trying to establish communications with him, he doesn't speak or anything like that. Okay, and in doing so, I realized that there were certain somatic, symbolic, and various other things that he tunes into, establish a communication path for him. And so in my quest to find a way to break through to him, I tried lots of different frequencies of entrainment, different ways to stimulate him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, it really opened up my mind to the idea of cymatics. Are you aware of cymatics? And I found this interesting because I'd been one of those who had been following the particle physics zoo for many years, watching what was happening at Fermi Lab, what's happening at CERN,
mm-hmm.
and the idea of finding, you know, the ultimate particle that's used in composing matter is interesting to me. And they think it's a Higgs boson, they think of how it, whatever. Now go back to this account where Enki did this reverse exorcism, and he's creating this. And the physics people are still trying to figure out how you take matter and compose stuff by reverse engineering using destructive means. Bash a couple electrons together at light speed and see what happens, right?
Sound and geometry.
Well, on the other end of that spectrum is the creative spectrum that seems to have to do with going all the way back to this creator of all who spoke the word and segregated the heavens from the waters, you know. So the idea of a spoken word or a vibration is coming up, and it's very important. And if you start to look at vibrations now, you realize a vibration is similar to a waveform that's vibrating through space. So you realize that everything is a vibration, whether it's matter or sound or a microwave or infrared. They're all vibrations. There's different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, so the idea of this energy and matter connection was really, really important to me. I just lost where I was going with that too. Cymatics is very interesting in that sound looks like it was used by the creator all to establish the law of time. And you'll see that in my Emerald Tablet number 10. I did a deep dive on that for people. But it also seems to compose matter. And here's what we know. If you vibrate a drum head, if you will, and you put some particles on it, and you run it through a frequency sweep of a constant tone, all of a sudden you can see the material start to take on different forms, mm-hmm. different geometric patterns. And this was always very interesting to me. I thought, you know, what's the relationship between vibration and structure? You know, it seems like crystals have a certain structure that put off certain energy that all these seekers are talking about, but at the same time, they do funky things to light. separating light into the visible spectrum, or other things that properties of materials do with light that I find very interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the idea that some cymatics could somehow be used to create form out of matter needed to be thought about even more, especially if the creator of all did it in the Emerald Tablets and in the Bible, right? So I started thinking a lot about that. How do you take energy and compose matter? And if you knew this, you'd get a Nobel Peace Prize, because you'd have just solved the grand unification theory, which tries to bring together gravity, electromagnetism, the weak nuclear force, and the strong nuclear force. Mm-hmm. Those are the four disparate energies that the grand unification theory is trying to bring together. Well, all of a sudden, if you go all the way back to the quote-unquote Big Bang, when everything happened, well, the Big Bang was a cymatic vibration, an eternal one issued by the creator of all. And he talks about this in the tablets, as Thoth asks what the law of time is to his teachers. Very, very, very deep, very deep. So the idea of cymatics was important to me relative to JJ, and here's why. We knew there was a lexicon in the DNA that properly specified like a computer program. If a computer program has an error in it, it won't even compile in the compiler. Okay, you go, oh, you got an error in line 417. This variable is undeclared, or just whatever the problem is, right? So it's a very exact thing to use programming languages, because it has to map to exact synthesis to the constructs of the lexicon, or it fails. Well, so I started thinking, well, what about our DNA? It's clearly a program. Could it be reprogrammed dynamically?
Pros, find the right flooring for the job in Lowe's newly redesigned flooring showroom. Shop our expanded assortment of trusted brands and get up to 35% off style selections, StainMaster, and StainMaster Pet Protect Special Order Carpet. And while you're here, save $100 on the DeWalt 20-volt max 6-amp-hour 2-pack of batteries. Now just $179. Get more of what you need faster and save more where it counts, from the ground up. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 8/26 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
The perfect lunch combo. That first bite of your favorite sub, followed by ice-cold Pepsi. Add a couple of friends, and now that's next level. Suddenly, the laughs get louder, the stories keep flowing, and the food tastes better. Because Pepsi brings out more flavor, more fun, and more of the moment. Food deserves Pepsi. Grab a Pepsi Zero Sugar today.
This episode is brought to you by ChatGPT. Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast. Have you guys heard about ChatGPT work? It's the new way to use ChatGPT for bigger multi-step projects. And when you need more than just answers, give ChatGPT work access to your apps and files, and it can create real work documents like spreadsheets, slides, and structured reports. Get started at chatgpt.com by selecting work mode, available on Plus and Pro plans.
And this is what led me to my research in grad school. I was of the opinion that it only happened through this genetic mutation model that we had as we were modeling population dynamics. So the idea is in Darwin's theory that a parent populace has a progeny, has a little mistake in its DNA. That mistake turns out to be a good thing, a desirable attribute. The environment rewards it, and everybody that doesn't have it dies off. That's the model I understood. But when I got into grad school, I realized from my deep research there that model doesn't account for everything. There has to be dynamic changeability in an adult DNA vibe, given the environment cataclysms we've seen. Otherwise, all life would be gone. So this led me to the idea that, and maybe I was just reaching for my son, that DNA could be changed. And it didn't have to happen in a zygote. It could happen during your life. So now all of a sudden I'm running across these latent circuits that we just went through. And the idea of a caduceus that's representing a transformation of energy with our DNA. And I got some hope that maybe cymatics was the key to helping my son JJ. And here's what I had in my mind. And if I get too deep in this, vector me elsewhere, okay? But it's pertinent to the idea of where we go with this book.
For sure.
If you could take a frequency that you knew interacted with DNA and caused it to do something, relax, unwind, whatever, change in some way, you might have the carrier wave to be in communication with that organ. Guess what? We found what that is. It's 528 hertz. It causes DNA to uncouple for some reason. We don't know why. Oh, this leads back to the Platonic solids. If you go back into Drinvalo Melchizedek's work, certain basic solids are used to create all matter that seem to show up when you do a cymatic vibration. So there's a connection. Cymatics uses the Platonic solids, and somehow, with the rules of the law of creation manager, can actually manifest matter from the periodic table of the elements. That's where E equals MC squared shows up. Energy and matter are related in that way. Energy can create matter. Matter can be destroyed, become energy. They go back and forth. It's an illusion. Matter is an illusion of energy, in my mind. As an electrical engineer, that's how I see it. Okay. So back to JJ. What if you could cymatically encode the proper lexicon of DNA onto this 528 hertz carrier, like a radio signal, and expose it to JJ and see if you didn't see real-time changes in his DNA that showed up? And it's a total long shot, okay? And I know I'm reaching, and it's a research project to move the ball further along. But what do I have to lose? Yeah. So what did I have to lose? And I'd been doing my structural practice for 7 years after I left engineering, even though I still was doing consulting. And I was looking at human energy bodies. I was looking at structure, all the things that were a problem for my kid. He was in braces until he was 5. He couldn't walk. His relationship to gravity was awful. And so that was another reason why I got vectored down that path, is to help him. Well, what I learned from that ended up in this book, and I never would have got there had I not followed my omens. Okay, it's top of the hour. Wanted you to have that background of energy and matter, and this little experiment I had in my mind about using cymatics to change JJ's DNA so that maybe someday he could communicate with me. And I'm not ever going to give up. I don't care what circumstances he ends up in. He's 15 now. Well, and they were using energy inside these chambers that were very specifically designed to affect consciousness.
Also,
and who was doing that? It was Thoth. So that's so interesting to me. Well, now you understand that there's a relationship between cymatics, the Platonic solids, and the law of creation of matter. And we're sneaking up on that, okay? Because I want you to think about something before we go to break here. What is the most unmanifested energy? In other words, what energy has the most potential to become matter?
Frequency.
Is it a Higgs boson?
Oh, wow.
Is it a phonon, a photon, a muon, a meson? What is it?
Light.
And when you figure this out, you all of a sudden are looking at the holographic simulator design rules of the creator of all. That's where it gets really interesting to me.
Sure.
It's understanding the mind of God. This is what Albert Einstein wanted to do. That's what many scientists that did what they did were trying to understand the design rules of our physical reality given us by the great architect.
Ouch. This knee is killing me, but I can't stop training. The marathon is in 2 weeks.
Let's get on ZocDoc and find a doctor to take a look at that for you.
Okay.
Here's a review. Dr. Craddock really takes his time.
No, I don't have time.
What about Dr. Charles? His patients say he can help find a quick fix, and he's in network.
Great, now we're talking. Book it.
Booked. 1 mile down, 19 to go.
Bring it on.
You've got options. Download the ZocDoc app today.
Hi, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. Are you looking for a beach read this summer? May I suggest your big wireless bill? It's got suspense, mystery, a slightly flat emotional arc, and a shocking twist where you realize you've been overpaying the entire time. Fortunately, though, Mint's story is better. Every plan, $15 a month, even unlimited. That's it. Happy ending, 0 tears.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
Tech.